easily. So if we start going that direction, this is going to be a mess. Escalation in Windows isn't really talked about, and I don't know how well it's known, but you can escalate from privileges fairly easily if you have a real live system. If you're on a base install, yeah, there's not a whole lot there to work with. There's a couple of things, I'll tell you, from what I found, but there's not that much. When you deploy real enterprise software on it, it's over. It's a mess because of all these problems with objects. And then the crapware problem, all this third-party advertising software, it's the same kind of effect, right? You're just throwing software to a machine. It's not locked down. And yeah, these can be used by attackers to exploit even hardened systems. It's amazing. I went through and I ran this test on my machine, and all the tools that I have, all my plugins and all these things create these objects, right? It's funny. They all create. I think a machine that's a lot of soft on it, and the Mega had open RPC endpoints, that anybody can access remotely. It's just amazing what's there, right? So thanks, Jesse Burns, Scott Sender, and Brad Hill. They work heavily on a lot of projects that involve knowledge of internal NT technologies. So it helped me kind of test out the permission issues and research them to make sure that all the claims are valid. Andreas and Genyang for peer review and testing ObjectTrace, going through all my drivers. Steve for holding my hand through icon creation, which is actually much harder than I thought it would be. It's one of those mysteries of the world. As our building and designing an interface, which I thought I've always strayed away from. I've written command line tools for 15 years. And I've never written a rich interface to handle all the events. And there's like 40,000 lines of code. I almost jumped out my window a couple of times. So I kind of apology to all my friends who are bill engineers and interface designers that I said their job was silly. I was wrong. Their job was very hard. Questions or comments?
I actually wanted to talk about private namespaces again.
Okay.
So I'm curious, and this probably comes from my ignorance with NT in general, but my experience with private namespaces and other operating systems like 9 and Linux and BSD now is that they're actually just creating a namespace or a container for everybody's individual objects. And in Unix, of course, that's temp file systems or drive. Yeah,
proc system. Yeah.
Is that the same thing that they're implementing?
It's the same kind of concept, and then the solution is further isolation, right? And it's kind of interesting when you see a trend in a group where they reapply the same ideal, but just deeper and deeper and deeper. And after a while, they realize it's not a good idea. They back up, and all that 10 years they wasted on development, they re-architect. And for this, you have to re-architect a little bit, I think. Some things have to change. I mean, the fact that it's a file system like this behaves like a file system, they should have more controls like a file system if they're going to do that. The isolation of objects, if they're local objects, they shouldn't be anywhere. They shouldn't be in any database or anything that's exposed to the outside. It's not local, but they're putting local objects in a global repository, right? Make something that's also public to anyone. So the idea that they have to just kind of rethink a couple of things. I don't think they're massive changes. I mean, maybe they are. I would assume they would have been fixed by now, but.
I kind of have a follow-up. I'm sorry to hijack this, but the only other question that I have is, I may have missed this as well. Are directories themselves made objects and put into this?
Directories, so you have the concept, when you think of files and directories in NT, these are actually all a file object that goes into basically like a driver interface. Each object has a set of routines to parse to deal with that object for security checks, for parsing, and for handling. For example, a pipe is actually a file. It's just a special file name that's interpreted by the endpoint. It parses that out and treats it as a different kind of file. It's a special file. So you hear about special files in NT, it's because it's really a file object type. And that driver that handles it, or filter, I think in this case, treats it differently. So as far as directories, there's two kinds. You have a directory as far as the file structure, which is treated the same as a file. And you have a directory in the object manager, which is a directory object that's different. There are some differentials there, so it's not the same. As far as difference, I think it's just type and the kind of content that's there. I mean, I think mainly it's just for organizational benefit. That's about it. The security really doesn't apply as much as we've seen, but it helps organize things, right? Instead of having one big bucket of objects.
Okay, thanks.
All right, that's it. Sorry about the demo, guys. Maybe next time.